Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to install the reel seat. Now this particular blank came with a little sticker on it that the manufacturer put on. We're going to remove that. Definitely don't want to leave that on there. That would be a barrier that would prevent the epoxy from really adhering to the blank and anchoring that reel seat in place. So here's the actual wood that we're going to use for the reel seat. Now this rod blank it's obviously tapered. It's thicker at the bottom than it is at the top. So everything that we're going to put on here, we're going to slide down. We're not going to ream it out to the point where you can get it over the bottom here, because then when you put it on, you're going to have a massive gap up at the top. All right. So this reel seat, the way that it goes together, I'm going to kind of pre-assemble this just to see how everything's going to go. Make sure that I'm happy with the fit and finish. Little butt cap. And this is what it's going to look like once the entire thing is installed. All right. This little piece right here is going to recess into the cork grip. So we can just set this aside for now. Don't really need it. One of the things that I do is I don't put the butt cap on until I'm practically done with the rod, because I like the luxury of being able to slide all the hardware all the way off. When this is glued into place, this stuff's not going to come off the end anymore, so I'm just going to set that aside for now. So we have a pretty large diameter there. This is really of no concern. What we need to do is make sure that this is going to fit over the rod blank. So this section right here is the very end, because that's what the threads come over. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to slide it down this rod, and we'll see how we're doing as far as measurements. And it starts getting really tight right there. Well, it's not going to be enough for us, because look at this. You got to get this butt cap on here. So we're going to need to do some work. Obviously we can't sand this blank down. We're going to have to remount this wood. So let's see about doing that. Now, I've spent quite a bit of money on wood and have been impatient in the past and tried to ream this out with a drill. Well, if you examine your reel seat, you realize you don't have a lot of wall thickness in there. And a power drill is typically just too much tool for the job. So what we're going to do here is we're just going to ream it out a little bit with a rat tail file. And really we're only talking about needing to ream out this top section a little bit, because it went over here just fine. We're going to have to do very, very little sanding to make this work. Now, if your reel seat that you purchase, it's falling off the rod, you've got too much diameter, well, that's where you would typically use some tape and create an arbor. Here's some 1/2-inch thick masking tape. You could put several nice even concentric or nice even rolls here, and then just kind of make up that gap, and then put your epoxy in the gaps and glue it into place. This is an ideal situation, and I really like it when I don't have to use a lot of tape. Although the tape doesn't matter, it's just holding it perfectly center while the epoxy dries, and then it is what is doing the job. As you can see, it's almost fitting over that base, so we're going to really have to do very, very little sanding here, and that's really an ideal situation. So let's go ahead and get started with that. I'm going to just get an old shop towel here, just to try to keep things nice and neat. I'm going to take a rat tail file, and I'm just going to start working this. Now again, it's this section here. Here's the threaded. Here's the part that will go under the threaded section. It's really just this section right up here that's going to need just to be relieved of a little bit of wood in that inside. So I'm just going to hold this with my hand. Don't ever try to put something like this in a vise. It'll crack. This is very, very sensitive. There's very, very little support when it's in this state. So don't try to get too happy with this thing. So I'm going to take this rat tail file, and I'm just going to start very slowly and evenly working it around and relieving some of the wood from the inside here to increase the inside diameter. Don't go too fast here. You don't want to end up with a really oblong inner hole through this. You really run the risk of having a reel seat that isn't quite even. So I'm supporting this rim with my hand, okay, and going through here. Don't try to bend this around. It's going to break. This is a freshwater rod, so we're going to be using nice wood here. If this was saltwater, this would probably be a non-issue. We'd have a completely metal reel seat with a really large inner diameter to begin with, and then we just use rolls of tape to make up that inner difference. Alright, so I've relieved just a small amount of the wood from this. I'm just going to slide this back over and see what it feels like. Check often, you don't want to, as you can see, I'm getting quite a bit further down here. So it looks like I need to push the file in a little bit more and start relieving some of this wood here in the center as well. Doesn't take very long. So I'm just going to keep on working on relieving some of this wood from the inner diameter. You can tell by the shavings just how much wood you're really removing. I would say that's pretty darn good. I'm pretty much flush here at this point. Now before I want to start gluing something here, I need to make sure that everything's going to fit together. Okay, you definitely don't want to glue this into place and find out that because of how the plug is manufactured, you've got too much blank sticking out and you can never get the plug on. That would be somewhat tragic considering the cost of a high quality blank. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of pre-assemble just this back section. I'm going to check this little plug that goes in the tip, and there's definitely enough room there, so we're looking good. So at this point, if the blank is flush with the wood back here, we're good to go. So I'm going to use that really as kind of my index mark for where I want everything to be. So I'm going to slide this off. I'm not going to slide it off that way. I'm going to slide it off this way. I'm not going to put too much stress on that wood. Now, we're going to use some 5-minute epoxy. You can get 5-minute epoxy from any hardware store. But the rod building component manufacturers, all of them have their own brand of 5-minute epoxy as well. You want something that's going to dry relatively quickly. Before I mix and apply that epoxy though, this has got a really smooth finish, okay? The wood it's a wood finish, so it's porous. So you know that epoxy is going to really soak into that wood really good and create a good permanent bond. But don't make the mistake of trying to glue anything onto a glossy blank. You need to sand it a little bit. You need to give that epoxy a tooth to grab a hold of. Imagine looking at this through a microscope. You need to create little valleys and ridges there so that epoxy can soak into those and really grip tightly. So you end up with a nice permanent bond from the wood to your rod blank. So I'm just going to take some sandpaper here. This is just 180 grit. Doesn't have to be anything too coarse. All I want to do is just rough it up. I'm really kind of just getting rid of the glossy finish that they put on this rod when they shipped it from the factory. And technically, if I fit everything together here, I'm going to be roughing up everything. But I'm going to leave this alone. I'm not going to get too happy, roughing stuff up here and accidentally rough up a part of the blank that was never meant to be hidden but is exposed. So I'm just going to rough this up really good. Yeah, that's nice and rough. There's ridges in there now. This will allow the epoxy to really kind of soak into those ridges, and we'll end up with a nice permanent bond. So it's time to mix up our epoxy.